My neighbor cornered me between the mailboxes and the hedge where I couldn't escape, and she wasn't letting me leave until I explained myself. "Why do you keep avoiding me, Daniel?" Sarah Mitchell asked, and her voice shook like she'd been holding that question inside for months. I stood there with bills clutched in my hands, and the only answer I had was the truth. Because looking at you hurts. I'm Daniel Rivera. I'm a firefighter in this small Oregon town called Riverside. And for 8 months I've been running from the woman who lives next door. Not because she's mean or rude or anything like that. Sarah's actually the nicest person on our street. She bakes cookies for the neighbors. She waters the community garden. She smiles and waves every single time she sees someone. But every time she waves at me, I pretend I don't see her. Every time she says hello at the grocery store, I suddenly remember I need something from a different part of the building. Every morning when she steps onto her porch with her coffee, I step back inside my house and wait until she goes back in. For 8 whole months, I perfected the art of disappearing whenever Sarah appears. And this morning, she finally had enough of it. Her face went pale when I said those words. Her hand dropped to her side. "What does that mean?" she whispered. "What did I do to make looking at me hurt you?" Quote, "Nothing. She didn't do anything." That's what made this so hard to explain. How do you tell someone that they remind you of the worst day of your life? How do you tell your neighbor that you know things about her that a neighbor shouldn't know? Things like her anniversary date, her favorite kind of tea, the exact sound she makes when she cries so hard she can't breathe. I know all these things about Sarah Mitchell, but not because I'm her neighbor. I know them because 2 years ago I held her husband while he died, but I couldn't say that. Not yet. Not standing here in the morning light with people walking their dogs down the street and cars driving past like this was just another normal Tuesday. So I stood there silent, and Sarah stared at me with those brown eyes that looked so much like his eyes, and I felt like I was drowning. "Daniel, please," she said, and now her voice cracked. "I've spent 8 months thinking I did something wrong, thinking maybe I'm too sad, too broken, too much of a reminder that terrible things happen. I need to know if I'm right or if there's something else going on." The mail in my hands crumpled, just junk, mostly advertisements and coupons and things that didn't matter at all compared to what was happening right now. I wanted to tell her that she wasn't broken, that she hadn't done anything wrong, that the problem wasn't her. It was me and the guilt I'd been carrying around like a backpack full of rocks for 2 whole years. But the words stuck in my throat. Sarah took a step closer. "I've tried everything to be a good neighbor. I brought you cookies when I first moved in, and you barely opened the door. I invited you to the block party, and you said you had to work, even though I saw your truck parked here all day. I asked if you needed help raking leaves last fall, and you acted like I was bothering you. What did I do to make you hate me?" Quote, "I don't hate you," I said quickly, because that was the furthest thing from the truth. "Sarah, I don't hate you at all." "Then what is it?" Quote, she wasn't crying, but her eyes looked wet. "Because I moved here to start over, to find a place where people didn't know me as the woman whose husband died, where I could just be Sarah, not Sarah the widow. But you look at me like you know exactly who I am. And it makes me feel like I can't escape it no matter where I go." Quote, my heart pounded so hard I could hear it in my ears. She was right. I did know exactly who she was, but not because of neighborhood gossip or because someone told me. I knew because I was there. I was there on the worst day of her life, wearing my firefighter gear, covered in ash and sweat, trying desperately to save the man she loved. A car honked somewhere down the street. A kid rode past on a bicycle. Normal sounds in a normal neighborhood, where 2 people stood frozen in a moment that felt anything but normal. "You really want to know?" I asked, and my voice came out rougher than I meant it to. "You really want to know why I can't look at you without feeling like I'm suffocating?" Quote, "Yes." She didn't even pause to think about it, just said yes, like she'd been waiting months to hear whatever I had to say. I looked at her standing there in her jeans and oversized sweater that looked like it belonged to someone bigger, someone who wasn't here anymore. And I knew I couldn't keep running, couldn't keep avoiding her, couldn't keep pretending that living next door to her wasn't slowly killing me inside. 2 years ago, I started, then stopped, tried again. 2 years ago, on a January morning, I responded to a warehouse fire on Industrial Boulevard. Sarah's face changed. Something flickered in her eyes. Recognition, maybe, or fear. Couldn't tell which. There was a man trapped under debris. I continued. And now the words came faster, like a dam breaking. He was conscious when I found him, scared. He kept touching his wedding ring and asking me to tell his wife he was sorry. Sarah's hand went to her mouth. The color drained from her face, but she didn't move, didn't run, just stood there like her feet had grown roots into the sidewalk, waiting for me to finish what I'd started. And I realized she needed to hear all of it, needed to know every detail I'd been holding inside for 2 years. The fire started around 6 o'clock in the morning, I said, and the memories came flooding back so clear it felt like yesterday. Electrical malfunction in an old warehouse on Industrial Boulevard. The kind of building that should have been condemned years ago, but somehow kept passing inspections. By the time our truck arrived, the whole east side was engulfed, flames shooting through the roof. Black smoke so thick you couldn't see 5 feet in front of you. Sarah wrapped her arms around herself, but she didn't tell me to stop. There were 4 people trapped inside, workers who'd come in early for inventory. My captain sent 2 teams in different directions. I went with Rodriguez through the loading dock entrance. We could hear someone shouting for help, so we followed the sound. I could still smell the smoke, still feel the heat through my gear, still hear the creaking of metal beams overhead that sounded like the whole building was about to come down on our heads. We found him in the back corner near the storage area. A support beam had collapsed during the initial explosion, pinned him from the waist down. He was conscious, which was good and bad at the same time. Good, because he could tell us where he was hurt. Bad, because he knew exactly how serious it was. My throat felt tight. I hadn't talked about this with anyone, not the department counselor they made me see, not my family, not my friends. For 2 years, I'd kept these details locked away because saying them out loud made them too real. His name was Michael, I said, and Sarah made a small sound. But I didn't know that yet. I just saw a man who needed help. A man with dark hair and blue eyes and a wedding ring he kept touching like it was the only thing keeping him grounded. Rodriguez went to call for heavy equipment to lift the beam. I stayed with him because that's protocol. You never leave a victim alone. The breeze picked up, scattering leaves across the driveway. Somewhere down the street, a dog barked. Normal sounds that felt wrong in this moment. He asked me my name. I told him Daniel. He said his name was Michael Mitchell, and that today was his anniversary. 2 years married to the love of his life. They were supposed to go to dinner that night, at some fancy restaurant downtown. He'd made reservations months ago. Sarah's hand pressed against her chest like she was trying to hold something in. I told him he'd make that dinner. Told him my crew was bringing equipment and we'd have him out in no time. Told him everything was going to be okay, because that's what you tell people in situations like that. You give them hope, even when you're not sure you believe it yourself. Quote, the warehouse had been so hot, even through my gear I could feel the fire eating its way through the building. The smoke was getting thicker. The structure was becoming less stable by the minute, and Michael Mitchell was stuck under several 100 pounds of steel and concrete with injuries I couldn't even see. We talked while we waited. He told me about his wife, about how they met at a coffee shop where she spilled her latte all over his laptop, about how he knew on their first date that he was going to marry her, about how she made him laugh every single day and how she was the best thing that ever happened to him. I could see Sarah's shoulders shaking now, but she still didn't interrupt. He showed me a picture on his phone. Wedding photo. You were wearing a white dress and holding sunflowers and smiling like you'd never been happier in your life. He said you were probably at home right now planning the anniversary dinner. Said you'd been excited about it for weeks. Said he couldn't wait to see your face when he gave you the present he'd been hiding in the garage. Quote, the equipment arrived 15 minutes after I found him. 15 minutes, that felt like 15 hours. 15 minutes, where I held Michael Mitchell's hand and promised him things I couldn't deliver. My crew set up the hydraulic jacks, started lifting the beam slowly, carefully, because moving it wrong could cause more damage. Michael was doing okay at first, talking, breathing, holding on. But then something changed. His breathing got shallow, His grip on my hand got weaker. I could see him fading. I've seen people die before. It was part of the job, but usually they were unconscious. Usually they didn't look at you with eyes full of fear and regret and desperate hope that somehow you'd find a way to save them. He went into cardiac arrest before we could get him out. I started chest compressions right there, working around the beam, doing everything by the book. Perfect rhythm, perfect depth, perfect technique. My captain called for paramedics. Rodriguez took over compressions when my arms got tired. We did everything right, but sometimes doing everything right isn't enough. Quote, "We got him out eventually, got him onto a stretcher, got him into an ambulance. I rode with him to Mercy Hospital doing compressions the whole way because I wasn't going to give up. I wasn't going to let him die without fighting for every second. My hands were shaking now. I shoved them in my pockets so Sarah wouldn't see. They worked on him in the emergency room for 40 minutes, brought in specialists, used every piece of equipment they had, but the damage was too severe. Internal injuries from the beam, smoke inhalation, cardiac arrest. His body just couldn't take it anymore. I looked at Sarah now, really looked at her, and I let her see everything I'd been hiding for 8 months. He died at 7:47 that morning, and before he took his last breath, he grabbed my hand one more time and asked me to tell his wife something. Asked me to tell Sarah that he loved her more than anything in the world. Asked me to tell her he was sorry he wouldn't make their anniversary dinner. Asked me to promise I'd make sure she knew he wasn't scared at the end." Quote, "Tears streamed down Sarah's face, but her eyes never left mine. So I went to the waiting room where they brought you. I saw the doctor tell you that your husband didn't make it. I saw you collapse onto the floor. I saw you scream his name so loud that everyone in the hospital could hear it. I saw security guards have to hold you back because you wanted to run to him. And I stood there in my dirty gear with ash on my face, and I wanted to tell you what Michael said. Wanted to keep my promise, but the words wouldn't come out." Quote, Sarah wiped her face with her sleeve. When she looked up at me, her expression was not what I expected. She did not look angry. She did not look shocked. She looked almost relieved, like I had just confirmed something she had been wondering about for a long time. "I know who you are, Daniel," she said quietly. "I've known since before I moved here." The world tilted. My brain could not process what she just said. "What?" Quote, "I know who you are," she repeated, and her voice was steadier now. "I've known for 2 years." I could not breathe, could not think. I just stood there while my neighbor, who suddenly was not just my neighbor, took my understanding of the past 8 months and turned it upside down. "Last spring, I was looking for a new place to live," Sarah said. "Somewhere far from our old apartment where everything reminded me of Michael. Somewhere I did not have to walk past the coffee shop where we met, or the park where he proposed, or the restaurant where we were supposed to have our anniversary dinner." She pulled her sweater tighter around herself. "My real estate agent showed me 3 houses in Riverside. I liked the third one. It had a nice backyard and big windows, and it felt peaceful. But when we were leaving, I noticed the mailbox next door. It had your name on it, Daniel Rivera." My heart started hammering against my ribs. "I went home that night and pulled out the fire department report," she said. "The one they gave me after Michael died. The one I read so many times, the pages started to fall apart. I kept searching for something I had missed, some detail that would explain why he did not come home that morning." Sarah's hands trembled as she spoke. "Your name was in that report," she said. "Firefighter Daniel Rivera responded to the scene, provided emergency care, stayed with victim until transport. I had read your name hundreds of times, but it was just words on paper. It did not feel real. Seeing it on that mailbox made you real. You were not just a name. You were a person who lived and breathed and existed in the world. I wanted to sit down. I wanted to run. I wanted to do anything except stand here and listen. So I called my agent the next day and made an offer on the house next door to yours," Sarah said. "Not the one I liked, not the one with the big windows, the one I had not even looked at properly. I bought it because I needed to understand who you were." "Why?" The question came out harsher than I meant. "Why would you want to live next to the firefighter who could not save your husband?" Quote, "Because you tried," Sarah said simply. "Because the report said you stayed with him, Because you did not leave him alone. Because when I read those words, it was the first time in weeks I could breathe without feeling like I was suffocating. She took a small step closer to me. For months after Michael died, I had nightmares about him being scared and alone, she said. About him calling for me and me not being there. About him suffering and nobody caring enough to help. But the report said you were there. It said you held his hand. It said you tried to save him even when it was impossible. Tears rolled down her cheeks again. I moved here because I wanted to see the kind of person who runs into burning buildings while everyone else runs out, she went on. I wanted to understand what made someone choose a job where they have to watch people die. I thought maybe if I could see you, know you, it would help me make sense of why Michael had to die that day. And did it? I asked, even though I was not sure I wanted the answer. No, she said, and let out a short, broken laugh. Because you avoided me. You acted like I was dangerous. You looked at me like seeing me caused you physical pain. And I could not understand why the person who showed my husband kindness in his last moments could not even say hello to me in the grocery store. The guilt twisted deeper in my chest. Sarah, I am sorry, I said. I did not know you knew who I was. I thought I was protecting you by staying away. Protecting me from what? She asked. From you? Quote, from me, I said. From the reminder of what happened. From having to see the face of someone who failed to save the person you loved most. Sarah shook her head slowly. You did not fail, Daniel, she said. The collapsing warehouse failed. A negligent building owner failed. Cheap materials and ignored safety codes failed. You did everything you could. Before I could respond, a black car pulled up to the curb across the street. A man in an expensive suit stepped out, and something about the way he moved made every instinct in my body go on high alert. He walked toward us with purpose, like he had been looking for us. Sarah Mitchell, he called out. I am Robert Haynes. I am an attorney representing the Caldwell Corporation. Sarah went rigid beside me. Her hand shot out and grabbed my arm, her fingers digging in hard enough to hurt. Mrs. Mitchell, I have been trying to reach you for 6 weeks, the lawyer continued as he got closer. The building owner is being sued by the families of the warehouse fire victims. Your husband's case is part of that lawsuit. We need to discuss your testimony. I stepped slightly in front of Sarah without even thinking. Her body language told me everything I needed to know. She was afraid of this man, and that was enough to make me ready to stand between them. Mr. Haynes, I said, keeping my voice level, this is not a good time. Whatever you need can wait. Actually, it cannot, he answered, opening his briefcase. The Caldwell Corporation is filing a motion claiming that firefighter negligence, not building code violations, contributed to Michael Mitchell's death. We need to discuss the emergency response procedures that day. My blood ran cold. They were blaming me. They were blaming the fire department. They were trying to shift responsibility away from the building owner, who had ignored safety violations for years. Sarah's grip on my arm tightened like a vice, but when she spoke, her voice was sharp and strong. Firefighter negligence? She said. Are you seriously standing here telling me you are trying to blame the people who ran into a burning building to save my husband? Quote, Mrs. Mitchell, I understand you are emotional, Haynes said, but this is a legal matter that requires careful examination of all the facts. I know the facts, Sarah said, and I had never heard her sound like that before. Her voice cut through the air like a blade. The fact is that the Caldwell Corporation owned a warehouse that violated 12 different safety codes. The fact is that they were cited multiple times and did nothing. The fact is that my husband died because they cared more about money than human lives. She let go of my arm and stepped closer to the lawyer. And the fact is that Daniel Rivera risked his life trying to save Michael, she said. He stayed with my husband when the building was collapsing around them. He held his hand and gave him comfort when I could not be there. He did chest compressions until his arms gave out and then kept going anyway, quote. Haynes shifted his weight, clearly uncomfortable, but Sarah was not finished. I will testify at that trial, she said. I will stand up in front of a judge and jury and tell them exactly what the Caldwell Corporation did. I will make sure everyone knows they killed my husband with their greed and negligence, but I will never say one word against the firefighters who tried to save him. She pointed at me. "This man is a hero," she said. "He runs toward danger while people like your client run away from responsibility. And if your motion tries to blame him or anyone else in that fire department, I will fight it with everything I have." The lawyer opened his mouth, then closed it. For a second, he looked like he wanted to argue, but even he seemed to know he was outmatched. "I'll inform my clients of your position," he said stiffly. "You'll be hearing from the court about your testimony." He turned, walked back to his car, and drove away, leaving the street quiet again like nothing had happened. But everything had happened. My heart was still racing. Sarah turned to face me, and the anger that had been burning in her eyes a moment ago softened into something else. Something warmer. Something I did not feel like I deserved. "I meant every word I said to that lawyer," she told me. "You're not responsible for Michael's death. You never were." I opened my mouth, but no sound came out. I could not seem to form words. I could not understand how the woman whose husband died in my arms was standing here defending me. "For 2 years I've been carrying guilt," Sarah said quietly. "Guilt that I didn't pick Michael up from work that morning. That I let him drive himself. That I didn't convince him to quit that job and find something safer. I've tortured myself with 1,000 what-ifs that changed nothing." She looked down at her hands, then back up at me. "When I moved here, I thought understanding you would help me understand what happened," she said. "But what I found instead was someone carrying the same kind of guilt I was. Someone who blamed himself for something he couldn't control." Her words hit me like a punch. "I should have done more," I said, and my voice cracked. "I should have gotten him out faster. I should have started compressions sooner. I should have." "Stop!" Sarah stepped closer and put her hand on my chest, right over my heart. The touch was light, but it felt like it pinned me in place. "You did everything humanly possible," she said. "The doctor told me that. The fire chief told me that. The accident investigation report said that. Everyone who knows anything about what happened that day says you did everything right. The only person who doesn't believe it is you." Her hand stayed there, warm through the fabric of my shirt. I knew she could feel how fast my heart was beating. "When I moved in 8 months ago, I thought I just wanted answers," she went on. "I wanted to understand the firefighter from the report, but then I started watching you through my window and I saw something I didn't expect." My throat tightened. "What did you see?" Quote, "I saw you leave for work before sunrise every day in your uniform," she said. "Saw you come home looking exhausted and haunted. Saw you sit on your porch some nights staring at nothing, like the weight of the world was on your shoulders." She gave a small, sad smile. "I saw you shovel my driveway when it snowed, even though you were avoiding me," she said. "Saw you fix my fence after that storm, even though you never said a word about it. Saw you leave groceries on my porch that time I was sick." Her voice grew softer. "I saw a man who cares so much about other people that he destroys himself trying to save them," she said. "A man who carries guilt for things he can't control. A man who's kind and good and completely unable to see his own worth." My chest ached. I did not know what to do with any of this. Sarah took a breath, like she was about to jump off a cliff. "I'm falling in love with you, Daniel," she said. The words hung in the air between us, fragile and dangerous at the same time. My mind went blank. For a moment, I could only stare at her. At the woman whose husband I had tried to save. At the woman I had spent 8 months avoiding, because every time I saw her face, I heard a dying man's voice in my head. "I moved here to understand the firefighter who held my husband," Sarah said. "But I stayed because somewhere in these 8 months of watching you avoid me, I started falling for my neighbor. The one who thinks he's invisible, but has been the most present person in my life since Michael died. I could not breathe, could not think. All the reasons why this was wrong lined up in my head like a list I had memorized." "It's complicated," she said softly. "I know that. I know it's built on tragedy and grief and the worst day of both our lives. I know you see Michael when you look at me. And I know that hurts. But Daniel, when I look at you, I see someone who understands loss. Someone who knows what it means to carry guilt that isn't yours. Someone who gets that grief doesn't disappear. It just becomes part of who you are." "Looking at you still hurts," I admitted. The words scraped their way out of my chest. Every time I see your face, I remember that warehouse. I remember Michael asking me to tell you he loved you. I remember failing to keep that promise. Then keep it now, Sarah said. Her eyes were shining with tears, but they were steady. Tell me what he said, she whispered. Tell me every detail you remember, because I've spent 2 years with a hole where those last moments should be. I need to know what happened. I need to hear it from someone who was there. I reached up and gently took her hand from my chest, but I did not let it go. I held it between both of mine like something fragile. I don't know how to do this, I said. I don't know how to be with someone when I couldn't save the person they loved most. And I don't know how to be with someone who reminds me of the worst day of my life. Me neither, she said. But maybe we figure it out together. A leaf fell from the tree above us and landed on her shoulder. Without thinking, I reached up and brushed it away. My fingers grazed her collarbone. The simple touch sent a jolt through me. It was such a small thing, but it felt huge. It was the first time I had touched her without flinching. Maybe we take it one day at a time, Sarah said. Maybe we're honest when it hurts too much and we need space. Maybe we learn to carry this guilt together instead of letting it crush us separately. Her hand was still in mine. Her eyes were still on me. What if I can't stop seeing him when I look at you? I asked. The fear in my chest felt like something that would never go away. Then tell me about him, she said, and a tear slid down her cheek even as she smiled. Tell me what you saw that I didn't get to see. Tell me about his last moments. Share those memories with me instead of carrying them alone. Maybe seeing him in me becomes something we share instead of something that keeps us apart. I looked at my neighbor, really looked at her, not as a reminder, not as a ghost, as a woman who had moved next door to her grief on purpose, as someone brave enough to stand up to a lawyer and an entire corporation, as someone who had just told me she was falling in love with me, even though everything about our story was complicated and messy and built on pain. I saw her pain. I saw her strength. I saw her hope. Okay, I said. The word felt like stepping off the edge of a cliff with no idea what waited below. Let's try, I said. Let's figure out how to look at each other and let it hurt and let it heal at the same time. Sarah smiled through her tears, and I saw it then. I saw Michael in the curve of her mouth, in the light in her eyes. But I also saw something that was only hers, something that belonged to Sarah alone. And for the first time, the pain in my chest felt like it might someday turn into something else. Something like healing. 4 months later, I sat beside Sarah in a courtroom that smelled like old paper and floor cleaner. She was wearing a dark dress and holding a small silver necklace between her fingers. I knew it was Michael's. I had seen it in the photo on his phone that day in the warehouse. The Caldwell Corporation's lawyers sat at one table, all suits and cold eyes. The families of the fire victims filled the benches behind us. I could feel their grief like a heavy blanket over the whole room. When they called Sarah Mitchell to the stand, my chest tightened. She squeezed my hand once before she stood. I did not want to let go, but I did. She walked to the witness stand with slow, steady steps. She raised her hand, swore to tell the truth, and then sat down. From where I sat, I could see her profile, the way her jaw clenched when the lawyer started asking questions. Mrs. Mitchell, can you tell the court about your husband, Michael? The attorney for the families asked. Sarah took a breath. He was kind, she said. He worked hard. He laughed at his own bad jokes. He loved sunflowers and cheap coffee, and he always left his socks in the living room. A soft ripple of sad laughter moved through the room. He loved his job, she went on. He also knew the warehouse was not safe. He talked about it, about broken alarms and blocked exits. But he needed the paycheck. We both did. She told them about the citations, about the ignored warnings, about how Michael called her on his way into work that last morning and promised he would be home in time to get ready for their anniversary dinner. The lawyer for Caldwell tried to steer it toward firefighter procedure, toward response time, toward any detail they could twist. Mrs. Mitchell, are you aware that the company believes firefighter errors may have contributed to Yes, Sarah cut in. Her voice was calm but sharp. I am aware of what your clients are trying to say, and I am here to say they are wrong. The judge raised an eyebrow but let her continue. Daniel Rivera stayed with my husband while that building fell apart around them, she said. He held Michael's hand. He talked to him. He fought for him. My husband did not die alone. He died with someone by his side who refused to give up on him. She looked straight at the Caldwell table. My husband died because your clients chose profit over people, she said. Not because the firefighters failed him. They were the only ones who did not. When she stepped down from the stand, her legs wobbled a little. I stood up as she came back to her seat and she sank down beside me. Her hand found mine again and held on tight. Weeks later, the verdict came. The building owner was found liable. The company was ordered to pay damages to the families. The fire department was cleared of any wrongdoing. Everyone said it was a victory. It did not bring Michael back. It did not erase the fire from my memory. But when the chief told us the results, he put a hand on my shoulder and said, "You did good, Rivera." She helped them see that. 7 months after the morning at the mailboxes, Sarah and I sat on my porch as the sun went down behind the trees. The sky was streaked with orange and pink. She had her knees pulled up to her chest, a blanket around her shoulders. I had 2 mugs of tea on the little table between us. "Tell me," she said softly, "tell me everything you remember about that day. From the moment you walked into the warehouse until the moment he was gone. I want to know all of it." I looked at her. I could see that she meant it. There was fear in her eyes, but there was also courage. So I told her. I told her about the heat that hit us when we opened the door. About the way Michael's voice sounded when he called for help. About how he kept touching his wedding ring. I told her about the jokes he tried to make to keep himself calm. About how he asked me to tell her that he loved her more than anything. About how his eyes softened when he said her name. I told her the exact words he used when he said he was sorry he would not make it to dinner. When he asked me to keep my promise. I told her that he was scared, but he was not alone. That I stayed with him until the end. That I did not leave him. Not for a second. By the time I finished, Sarah's cheeks were wet. Her hands shook as she wiped her face, but she was smiling through the tears. "Thank you," she whispered. "I have been living with a blank space for so long. Now I have something real to put there." She leaned her head on my shoulder. I let out a breath I felt like I had been holding for 2 years. A year after the mailbox conversation, we were on her porch instead of mine. It was spring. The small flower bed by her steps was full of bright colors. She had planted sunflowers along the fence line, even though they looked too tall for the little yard. We were drinking coffee, not the fancy kind, just the cheap grocery store brand she said Michael used to buy because it did the job. "It does not hurt as much anymore," she said suddenly. I turned to look at her. "What does not?" "Looking at you," she said, her lips curved in a soft smile. At first, all I could see was the man who held my husband while he died. Then, for a while, I saw both of you and it hurt so much I could barely stand it. Now when I look at you, I still see that firefighter. But more than that, I see you. Just you." "Daniel," she added quietly, "the man I love." The words moved through me slow and deep. "Looking at you still hurts sometimes," I admitted. "But it is different now. It is like the way your muscles ache after a hard workout. It is not the kind of pain that breaks you. It is the kind that means you are getting stronger." She laughed softly. "Trust a firefighter to compare grief to exercise." "Sorry," I said, but I smiled. "We have been together a year and a half now. We still have bad days. There are mornings when she wakes up from a dream, and I know it was about Michael, because she says his name before she says mine. There are nights when I wake up sweating because I smell smoke that is not really there. On those days, we do not pretend we are fine. Sometimes we sit in silence. Sometimes we talk. Sometimes we cry. Sometimes we take a drive to nowhere with the windows down and the music up, just to remind ourselves the world is still out there. We celebrate his birthday. We visit the memorial by the old warehouse lot. We say his name without flinching. We also cook dinner together. We argue about movies. We fall asleep on the couch halfway through some show. We laugh at stupid things. We make plans for a future that still feels strange and bold and a little bit stolen. Healing did not mean forgetting Michael. It did not mean pretending that warehouse fire never happened. It meant learning to live with it. Learning to let the pain sit beside us without taking over everything. One evening, we were walking back from the mailbox together. The hedge was casting long shadows on the sidewalk, just like that first confrontation. "Do you remember the first time I cornered you here?" Sarah asked, bumping her shoulder lightly against mine. "How could I forget?" I said. I thought my heart was going to explode. "You looked terrified," she said. "I was," I answered. "You were my worst memory and the best promise I ever made, standing in one place." She stopped and turned to face me, her back against the hedge, our bodies closed like they had been that morning, only different now. "And what am I now?" she asked. I reached up and tucked a piece of hair behind her ear. Her eyes were steady on mine. "You are still a reminder," I said, "but not just of what I lost. You remind me of what I still have, of what I found." I kissed her there between the mailboxes and the hedge, the same place she had once demanded answers from me. This time there was no guilt in the way I held her. There was grief, yes, there always would be, but it stood next to something else. Love. My neighbor once asked me why I kept avoiding her. Back then, the only answer I had was that looking at her hurt. Now I know the full truth. Sometimes the person who reminds you of your deepest loss is the same person who helps you heal from it. Sometimes the person you run from is the only one who can stand beside you when the past feels too heavy. I loved my neighbor, even when it scared me, even when it hurt. She was already married when I first learned her name on a warehouse floor. By the time I learned how to look at her without running away, she was something else. She was the proof that love can grow in the ashes of the worst day of your life.